Yesterday, the New York Mets made 5 more roster cuts, bringing the total number of players at MLB camp down to 44. With less than 10 days remaining until opening day, what will be the Mets' 26-man roster on March 27th? I'll break it all down on today's show.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on X, Finkelstein Ryan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. This episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. And the New York Mets made 5 roster cuts on Monday, narrowing down their list of players in camp to 44. I'll tell you, I tried to do the math on that, and I came up with 41 players. So there's obviously a few that I'm missing. For example, if you go to MLB.com, you look at the non-roster invites. Jose Urena is not listed as he's signed after the Mets had already started camp. So maybe there's another couple players that are of a similar status that have slipped through the cracks here. But the bottom line is we're getting down to the nitty gritty, 9 days away from opening day, and there's still some decisions to be made. There's still the question of replacing Jeff McNeil at second base. Who are the infielders that are going to grab that spot as well as the backup utility infielder spot? There's the question of a backup catcher. What are the Mets going to do with their rotation? And then finally, who are the pitchers that will land those final bullpen spots? So before we get into all of those different things throughout the show today, let's talk about the most recent cuts. The Mets made, again, 5 cuts on Monday. Chris Williams, the catcher, was reassigned to minor league camp. That now narrows the field for the backup catcher job to Hayden Sanger and Jackson Reitz. Now, Jackson Reitz is a guy that did have some time with David Stearns in Milwaukee. Not a bunch, but they did cross paths. He does have a little bit of MLB experience, not much. I believe it's like, was it 8 games, 9 games? It's a very minimal amount. He does bring a little bit more with the bat than Hayden Sanger, but so far in camp, he hasn't done much of anything. A 5.05 OPS, only 17 at-bats. Here's the thing, though, when it comes to this backup catcher conversation, or the competition, I should say. Hayden Sanger got 4 starts last week. Jackson Reitz got none. At this stage of the game, my prediction is Hayden Sanger is the Mets' backup catcher come opening day. For those of you who aren't familiar with Hayden Sanger, he has been in the Mets farm system for a very long time. He is a great defender behind the dish, knows some of these pitchers, so it makes a lot of sense that Sanger would get a spot. The only caveat at this point for me is if the Mets can land a different catcher before opening day, and the one that jumps out is Tomas Nido, who is still in Tigers camp. He is kind of unlikely to get a spot because they have a young catcher in Dylan Dingler, who should get the backup catcher job. If Tomas Nido breaks free, he is the ideal candidate for the Mets to go out and try to acquire. But barring that move, I think we probably see Hayden Sanger make a roster spot. There were 2 other position players that were reassigned, Luis De Los Santos and Joey Meneses. Luis De Los Santos was vying for that second base job or the utility infielder job. He now gets an option. Joey Meneses was theoretically an option. Let's say Starling Marte was not good to go come opening day. Joey Meneses could have been a right-handed complement to Jesse Winker in a DH platoon. Starling Marte has been playing a little bit. Doesn't seem like that's likely. And if he does miss any time, Alex Canario, we'll talk about him in a minute. He is a more likely guy to get that run instead of a Joey Meneses, so no surprises there. When it comes to the non-roster invites outside the catchers, the last one remaining on the position player front is Donovan Walton, who is sort of just the last guy in camp that could potentially push a Brett Baty or a Luisangel Acuna, although right now it appears like the Mets are planning to platoon the 2 of them at second base to start the year, and I want to talk about that platoon a little bit in the next segment. On the pitching front, Anthony Gassé and Sean Reed Foley were both sent down to minor league camp. That leaves Genesis Cabrera and Chris Davinsky as the last non-roster invites. Actually, Jose Urena would be part of that group as well for non-roster invites still in MLB camp. But again, there might be a couple of their arms that I'm missing. But as we get into the final segment of the show today, where I'm going to talk about the bullpen, you'll understand that the 43rd and the 44th guy in camp right now really doesn't matter anyway. There's about 7 guys competing for 3 spots. Again, we'll get to that a little bit later. So now let's talk about where the Mets roster sits right now. So Jesse Winker today came up with a calf cramp. It looked bad, but they're saying it was just a cramp in his leg. He got checked out, got some treatment. He should be fine. Brandon Nimmo has played every other day over the past 5 days, and he played 5 innings of left field on Monday. So that is a very positive development. Starling Marte had played every other day last week, so we got 4 games in, and he just did a back-to-back, played on Sunday and again on Monday. So at this moment, I would say all these guys should make the roster. Now, it is fair to wonder if at some point over the next 9 days, one of those 3 guys drops out. But at the time being, I'm not going to predict an injury. So the Mets outfield set: Starling Marte, Jesse Winker, Brandon Nimmo, Juan Soto, Tyrone Taylor, and Jose Siri. Now, Alex Canario is the guy that is waiting in the wings. Jose Azucar technically is as well. Neither of them has options, so they will be the last cuts of camp as the Mets will try to pass them through waivers. But Canario, to me, is the guy that would get a spot if an outfielder went down. Canario had his best game by far on Monday, where he walked 3 times and hit a home run in his final at-bat. So a good game there, but overall, he's still only hitting 154 in camp. Most likely, he is not going to make this team. Now we got the catching situation already squared away as well. So Luis Torrens, Hayden Sanger is my prediction. Then we get into the infield side of things. Francisco Lindor, Pete Alonso, Mark Vientos, they're all locks. They're all starting players. And again, to replace Jeff McNeil, it seems like the Mets are going to go with Brett Baty and Luisangel Acuna. Donovan Walton is 6 for 31 in camp. He's hitting 194. He's not really doing much to stand out as a guy that should make this team, other than the fact that the Mets could decide to option an Acuna down just to give him more time to develop. But Acuna is starting to swing a hot bat, and that could lead into his playing time in this platoon. I want to talk about that as well as the starting rotation in just a minute. First, though, quick word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Just Ingredients. When it comes to fueling your body, quality matters. That's why Just Ingredients is changing the game with clean, high-quality products designed to support better health and peak performance. Just Ingredients offers an NSF-certified line of protein powder, electrolytes, pre-workout, and creatine, all rigorously tested to ensure they're free from substances banned by major athletic organizations. Just Ingredients has also partnered with 2-time MVP Bryce Harper, who trusts their NSF-certified sports line to fuel his training and recovery. I love that Just Ingredients prioritizes wholesome, nourishing ingredients without the artificial junk. You read the back of the bag, you're not going to see any ingredients that you just don't know. And whether you're recovering after a workout or you need an energy boost, their grass-fed whey protein and pre-workout deliver real results. Visit justingredients.us/Bryce Harper and use the code LOCKEDONMLB for 20% off your first order. And for more wellness tips, follow at just.ingredients on Instagram. Today's episode is also brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, entertainment, it's easy to lose track of where all that money went. That's where Monarch Money comes in. It's your personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center where you can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So you stop just managing your money, you start building wealth. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch Money to check your finances, track your spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONMLB for half off your first year. For those of you watching on YouTube today, I really appreciate the support. For those of you watching on YouTube today, if you can do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Our goal is to have 13,000 subscribers by opening day. We're running out of time, and we still need over 400 more subscribers. So I appreciate all of you who click that red button to subscribe. Let's talk about this battle for second base reps. It is down to Luisangel, Acuna, and Brett Baty, and it seems like they will start the season in a platoon, which would give Baty more playing time, but I don't necessarily think this has to be a straight down the line platoon. Baty gets to start against all righties. Acuna gets to start against all lefties. I do think that Acuna will start against all lefties, but obviously you're going to see more right-handed starters than left-handed starters, and I think they should split this playing time 50-50. I think it should be, with 6 games typically in most weeks, especially early in the season when Jeff McNeil's out. I think 3 starts should go to Acuna, 3 starts should go to Baty. And it's that simple, and you can get those guys some run, playing other positions potentially if you ever want to overlap. So, and maybe there's a game where you think it's a particularly bad matchup for Mark Vientos, or maybe you want a better infield defense behind whatever pitcher you have. Maybe Clay Holmes starting, not opening day, but maybe his second start of the season. You want your best infield defense, so you want Baty at third and Acuna at second. You can do that. You have that roster flexibility, but to me, both of these guys should get plenty of playing time, and you see which one pops. And if one of them does, that's the guy that stays on the roster when Jeff McNeil comes off the IL, and that might be a guy that can eat into the playing time of Jeff McNeil at second base and maybe even others around the diamond. But it's clear these guys are going to make the team at this point. I'd be very surprised if Donovan Walton ends up making it. And when you look at their camp so far, Brett Baty has the better numbers overall, but Acuna's swinging the hotter bat. He's 9 for 34, but he started camp 2 for 16. So he is 7 for his last 18. He's hitting 389 over his last 7 games. Small sample size, but all the sample sizes are small in spring. He's definitely starting to get a little more comfortable. Maybe he's not pressing as much as he was. Maybe he's getting back to his game. If Luisangel Acuna is not chasing, if he's putting himself in good counts, and if he's putting bat on ball, he's going to be a productive offensive player because that speed is going to allow him to get some extra hits that other guys wouldn't get. Ground balls in the infield, if they're hit softly, those are potential base hits for him. Balls hitting the hole are going to be really tough to throw him out. So he has a game that he has to really get to here. And it seems like he's starting to find it lately. You're not going to see a ton of power. Last year, what you saw in that 2-week sample was not the expectation you should have for Acuna as an offensive player. Yes, if somebody leaves a pitch down the middle, he's going to be able to do some damage on it. But his game is going to be hitting for a high average and then leveraging his speed wherever he can. So we'll see if he can continue this. If he does, he might push Brett Baty to lesser and lesser playing time because he does give you the higher floor with the defense at second base, which will be elite. To have Acuna and Lindor up the middle, you are going to see an outstanding double play combination. Brett Baty is still learning the position. Granted, he does give you more upside offensively because he has more power to tap into. You're talking about a player in Acuna. How tall is he? Like 5'8"? Not that height and size is everything, but when you're talking about power, it's a little more projectable. He's listed at 5'10", Acuna is. It's a little more projectable when you have a guy who has the build of Brett Baty, a big, strong guy that's put muscle on year over year over year, who's 6'2", who has those long levers from the left side. He has the ability to tap into more power, but we'll have to see if he can do it against big league pitching during the regular season. Bottom line, these two guys will make the team, and then you just see who ends up becoming the hot hand to potentially actually earn that starting second base job, or they'll probably both still split time regardless. But at some point, you might see the playing time skew to one guy or the other, especially if Jeff McNeil's out for longer than we expect. Now, when it comes to the starting rotation, it's pretty clear what the Mets are going to roll with, right? They're going to roll with a combination of 6 pitchers eventually, with Kodai Senga, Clay Holmes, David Peterson, Paul Blackburn, Griffin Canning, and Tyler McGill. But to start the season, the Mets don't need a 6-man rotation. And just like it started to be kicked around a little bit that, the Mets are considering a platoon at second base with Acuna and Baty, there's also some rumblings that Paul Blackburn is going to start the season out of the bullpen. Now, this is probably due to the fact that Tyler McGill and Griffin Canning have showcased better stuff so far in camp. And so I think long-term in the rotational depth chart, they have moved ahead of Blackburn. And I think Paul Blackburn is getting dangerously close to the Adrian Hauser spot from last year, where Hauser was moved to the bullpen. He actually did pitch well to the bullpen for some time, but eventually, as the numbers on the roster dwindle and you have guys coming off the IL like a Sean Manaea and a Frankie Montas, at some point, you might decide that you're better suited having someone like Max Kranick in the bullpen instead of Paul Blackburn, and he could get squeezed off this roster at some point, or injuries happen and he ends up sticking, or you never know. Once the season starts, the Mets will eventually get to a 6-man rotation, and Paul Blackburn, maybe has some good starts and he changes that narrative. But for right now, it appears like Tyler McGill and Griffin Canning are going to get those final rotation spots. Canning had a great start on Monday, faced 17 hitters, struck out 9 of them. I will say this was a split squad. Actually, I don't know if the Rays were in a split squad, but when you see these teams play on the road, you're not always getting the best lineup. And for the Rays, there was only one established good big league hitter in that lineup, and that was Josh Lowe, and Josh Lowe did homer. Doesn't mean that Canning didn't look great. He did. 4 2/3, allowed just 3 hits, 1 walk to 1 run on the homer. Struck out 9 again on the 17 batters that he faced, got up to 71 pitches. So far in spring, 10 innings pitched, 1 earned run, 6 hits allowed, 2 walks allowed, 16 strikeouts. So Canning's numbers, especially after this start, are very, very good. On the other hand, Paul Blackburn started the other end of that split squad, and he did well. Allowed 3 hits, walked 2, gave up 2 runs, struck out 6. Only has 9 strikeouts and 12 2/3 innings pitched, 6 walks, 9 hits allowed, but he has stretched out well. So he is going to be the long man out of the bullpen to start the season. And then eventually he will get into that rotation. Tyler McGill looks like he has a rotation spot all but secured. He's made 3 starts. He's pitched to a 3.86 ERA, 13 strikeouts to 2 walks, has allowed 10 hits. Now, when it comes to how the Mets will line up their rotation, we got a big piece of the puzzle recently as Tim Britton reported that Luisangel will make his first start on April 1st. That is the 5th game of the season. This lines him up to pitch against the Marlins on April 1st and then again at home on April 7th. Then he'll face the Sacramento A's on April 13th, which means the Mets will not need a 6th starter until Luisangel's spot comes up the 4th time through the rotation on April 18th. So that could be the first start for Paul Blackburn. You never know, though. Sean Manaea could fly through his rehab. He might be good to go by then. I think it's more likely that he needs a little bit more time than that. Clay Holmes will open the season as your opening day starter. David Peterson likely gets the ball in the 2nd game, which would line him up to start the home opener. My guess is Canning will be the 3rd starter in this rotation, McGill the 4th. And again, of course, Senga bringing up the rear as the 5th starter, but only due to getting him that extra time. And Paul Blackburn will be the long man in an 8-man bullpen. Who will be the other 7 arms that break camp? We're going to talk about that next. First, though, another quick word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Supply House. Get the supplies you need from the site that's made for skilled trades, Supply House. Whether you're in plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from 400-plus top brands, you'll find exactly what you need delivered fast from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Supply House offers expert support and industry-leading service, so you always talk to a real person. And for trade pros, for an extra edge, their free Trade Master program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Join the Trade Master program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering HVAC electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Plus, promo code SH5 is available for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com.
The NCAA tournament is here, and so is the bracket breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day.
If you're an everyday listener of the show, make sure you become a Locked On Mets insider. This is our texting service. We get updates from me anytime news breaks in the Mets. You can ask me questions anytime. You can also take part in our Locked On Mets sign photo giveaways. If you want to be Locked On Mets insider, find the link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. All right, so let's go through the Mets bullpen. Edwin Diaz, Ryan Stanek, Jose Budo, and Paul Blackburn are all locks when it comes to their contract status and their health. Diaz will be your closer. Stanek will be a setup man. Jose Budo will again be in that multi-inning role, but a guy that can pitch and leverage. And Blackburn will be the long man. There's still 4 more spots up for grabs. Reed Garrett has an option, so technically he could be sent to the minor leagues, but I would be shocked if he doesn't break camp with the club. He has not allowed a run in 5 innings so far this spring. He's given up just 1 hit, 1 walk, 6 strikeouts. He pitched really good in stretches last year. Garrett should make this team, no problem. Daniel Nunez made his first spring appearance on Monday. He touched 98. He had a 1-2-3 frame. He only needed 11 pitches to do it. He looked just as dominant as we saw last year, picked up a strikeout. He gave you a little taste of what he can be, but I still, at this stage, don't expect the Mets to have him on the roster come opening day because he has options. I just think they're going to put him in bubble wrap to start the year. This is a guy that they might not want to throw on back-to-back days. And if you're going to be the 8th inning guy for the New York Mets, you sort of need to be, able to really be leaned on. And I just don't know if Nunez is going to be able to be leaned on early in the season. So my guess, he starts the season in Syracuse, but he is an arm that they will work with closely to manage his workload to start, eventually get him to the point where he can throw back-to-backs. And then once that happens and the Mets have an opening in their pen, he'll be an early season promotion. AJ Minter has made 2 appearances so far this spring, 2 clean innings. I think he probably is due to pitch on Tuesday. We'll see how that goes. I think it's getting more and more likely that he does break camp with the team. If you see AJ Minter start to have only a day off in between appearances, I think they might include him on the roster. He's your second best reliever. When I guess you can argue that Nunez has a higher ceiling, but when it comes to dependability and track record, Minter's the guy that's supposed to pitch in the 8th inning before Edwin Diaz. He's the one lefty that you have that's really, really solid in camp. There's a couple others that we'll talk about, but I'm starting to think that Minter might break camp with this team. But if he doesn't, then you have 7 guys that are vying for 3 spots. If he does, 7 guys vying for 2 spots. Max Kranick has stood out a lot so far this spring. 12 strikeouts in 9 1/3 innings pitched, 1 walk, 8 hits, 2 earned runs. Both of those coming in his last appearance. Kranick has a really good fastball and ability to pitch multiple innings. I think he's probably the favorite right now among this group of relievers to break camp, but you really never know. Huascar Brazaban has more big league experience and success pitching out of the bullpen. 8 innings so far this spring, 2 earned runs, 3 walks, 10 strikeouts. He has done a pretty nice job. I think he has as good a shot as anyone also to make this team. Then you have Tyler Zuber, who has not allowed a run in 5 2/3. For some reason, I just don't think he's going to make this roster, but he does have a really good sweeper, and we will see him at points this year. All 3 of those guys have options, so they're going to be the guys that are up and down and up and down. They'll each have 5 options in their optioneer that the Mets can use. So a couple of them or one of them is going to get one of those options at the end of camp, but we'll see all of them throughout the season. I can guarantee you that. Danny Young is the guy that's out of options. Last year, we saw him as the guy that was going up and down. So far this spring, he's only gotten 3 innings pitched, 3 strikeouts, no walks, 2 hits, 1 run. You never know how much he's been pitching on backfields in minor league camp and things like that. But a little bit interesting that he hasn't gotten a ton of run. You can look at that in one of 2 ways. One path for that, or one line of thought would be he's going to make the team, so they're not too worried about getting him out there. The other thought is maybe they're not that high on him anymore, and they're planning on passing him through waivers, and maybe they don't want too many teams to get eyes on him. I mean, that could be another reason for his lack of workload. You never know. Non-roster guys, Chris Devanski, 5 innings pitched in spring, 1 earned run, 5 hits, 2 walks, 8 strikeouts. He looks really good. Genesis Cabrera has an 8.31 ERA in 5 appearances, but really had 1 awful outing and then another one where he gave up a run. Other than that, he's been solid. On my last roster prediction, I had him making the team. Now I do not. Jose Urena gave up 7 runs in 2 1/3 innings. I would be shocked if he makes it. So, what will the Mets do with their roster? My prediction is AJ Minter breaks camp. So that leaves only 2 spots for all these guys. And you know what? It's crazy. The more that I said that, and I'm thinking, are they really going to cut bait on Danny Young when they could start Kranick or Brazaban in the minors? I'm going to go with the graphic that I made. But I think that's really what the decision is. I honestly do. I think it comes down to Danny Young, Max Kranick, and Huascar Brazaban. If AJ Minter is on the IL to start the season, I think all 3 of those guys make it. If not, and Minter is there. Here is the roster. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see it, but I will read out the whole 26-man roster that I'm predicting here 9 days away from opening day. Probably the last prediction we will do because as the Mets make more cuts, there's probably not going to be much intrigue left in doing a show like this. But let's run through the roster for your rotation. Kodai Senga, David Peterson, Clay Holmes, Griffin Canning, Tyler McGill, and I did include Paul Blackburn in the rotation part of this because he's going to be in long relief. He might piggyback a Canning or a McGill, but that's only because the Mets have enough off days where they're going to lean into their strength, with their strength being, the 5 guys ahead of him in this rotation. And also just having a guy that, if Kodai Senga's mechanics look awful and he gets pulled in the 2nd inning of his first start, you have a guy in the bullpen that can go and give you bulk relief. So for now, Blackburn's in the bullpen, but eventually this team will have a 6-man rotation. And if they get to that point on April 18th and Frankie Montas and Sean Manaea are not ready to return, and Montas won't be, Manaea, there's an outside shot, my assumption would be that Blackburn will eventually get into this rotation. Now the bullpen, Edwin Diaz, AJ Minter, I have making this team and not being on the IL to start the year. Ryan Stanek, Reed Garrett, that's sort of your 4 primary high leverage guys. Jose Budo, Max Kranick, and Huascar Brazaban gives you 3 pitchers who all can go multiple innings, all can be Swiss Army knives. I think it gives Carlos Mendoza a lot of flexibility in his bullpen and a potential for his bullpen to really cover a lot of innings, which could be necessary as you still have guys trying to get into full, season, ramp up to actually be able to throw 100 pitches. I don't know how many of these guys are actually going to be at that point come opening day. It might take them a week or 2 to get there. So I think it makes a lot of sense to have a Kranick and a Brazaban make this team because they're guys that can go out and give you multiple innings. And then if you burn one day, you have the other one in the reserve for the next day. And if you get to that point where your bullpen gets super taxed, that's when you option one of them and call up a Tyler Zuber or whatever it is. Now the catchers, Luis Torrens and Hayden Sanger are my predicted catchers come opening day, although I will put the caveat that if Tomas Nido can be had, the Mets should go out and get him. Infield, Pete Alonso, Francisco Lindor, Mark Vientos, all everyday players. Brett Baty and Luisangel Acuna will be the utility infielders that are platooning at second base. Baty will be your backup third baseman. Acuna will be your backup shortstop. And again, they're both going to get most of their time at second base. And depending on the state of the outfield with, Winker and Nimmo and Marte, how many of those guys do you want to stick in left field? I think there's also a world that you could see Acuna get the occasional start in the outfield, whether that's starting in center with Tyrone Taylor in left, just because Acuna has played more center field or has played center field, hasn't really played in the corner, or if they just don't care and stick him out there because he's an athlete, he can go out and do it. I wouldn't be surprised if we see Acuna get some innings in the grass as well as the dirt, but he'll primarily be a second baseman for the Mets. Outfield, Juan Soto, Brandon Nimmo, Jose Siri, Tyrone Taylor, Starling Marte, and Jesse Winker. Caveat there being you have 3 guys who have had injuries in camp with Nimmo, Marte, and Winker. Any of them goes down, Alex Canario, I think, makes this roster. So that's it. That's my 26-man roster for the New York Mets. Frankie Montas, Sean Manaea, Jeff McNeil, and Francisco Alvarez are the guys that will start the season on the IL who are expected to return. There's obviously guys like Drew Smith and Adbert Azale that are on the 60-day IL. Christian Scott as well that won't be back or won't be back until the absolute end of this season. But guys that you can expect to make an impact still in the first half, Montas, Manaea, McNeil, and Alvarez. Anyway, that is going to be all for today's edition of Locked On Mets. I appreciate all of you who tuned in. I told you on yesterday's show that today we were going to talk Juan Soto as well as Shohei Ohtani and the long-standing race that could begin here for MVPs in the National League. It's It's going to be a fun show. Assuming there's not any news that draws me away from that topic, I will discuss it for tomorrow's edition of Locked On Mets. And then to close out the week, we're going to do a lot of NL East season preview stuff. I'm going to break down the top infield, top outfield, top rotation, top bullpen, all of this different stuff, and have a grading system to do it. So make sure you tune into shows throughout the week to get ready for the upcoming season. I appreciate all of you for tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, please do me that favor. Hit the subscribe button to help us get closer to that goal of 13,000 subscribers by opening day. If you're listening on the audio side, follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen or your first watch every day. Now for your second watch, head over to YouTube and check out the first ever 24/7 streaming channel that covers everything in the world of sports. We're talking about Locked On Sports Today with our local host from each team, league-wide host from each league, by Locked On Sports Today, streaming 24/7 on YouTube.